Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm here with our host, Peter Scalzo. And we've been in a series of the stages of the cancer journey, and there's 6 that we've put out there. Not that we've released yet. We've done 3. So we're at the halfway point. And our goal was to go through all 6. And in the midst of this, we have an interruption. And the interruption was something that wasn't expected. It wasn't something that either one of us were thinking about probably at the time. And that interruption kind of rocked your world a bit. And so I wanted us to interrupt the series and talk about what's going on in your journey, because you received news and it kind of really shook things up a bit. And and let's talk about it. I'd like to hear what happened. And
yeah, it's been a wild roller coaster ride. And it started last Wednesday. I had my which was a week ago. Yeah, because I didn't have the podcast that day. I went in. Yep. I had to do a surgical procedure, so I was under general anesthesia. A new tube was placed in my kidney, and he explored the urinary tract and found growths, tumors. And he removed them and announced to myself and my brother, who was with me at the hospital, that he found cancer. And so I already had an appointment with my oncologist on Thursday. So the next morning I went in to my oncologist, and I had told friends and family that the cancer had come back Wednesday. Went into my oncologist, and she had the 2 pamphlets ready for me, back again on immunotherapy and a new targeted chemo drug that I was going to try for the first time. And they ushered me right into the infusion center, and I immediately had an infusion that day. And so it was this whirlwind of, guess what, you have cancer again. It would be my 7th recurrence, and it felt a little different because it seemed to be, I had a fairly long period of not having any cancer. So all of a sudden I was thrust back into metastatic cancer, active metastatic cancer space. I've been treated for metastatic cancer for 7 years, but this was going back again into active.
You have tumors
it sort of made sense because we had stopped immunotherapy some months ago because of my kidney function. We were hoping to resurrect the one kidney that I have, resurrect the function there.
Which was the purpose of the tube, was to allow the kidneys to function at a higher rate.
And the numbers were better. So it was showing that
kidneys were increasing.
Yeah, the one kidney. The other one doesn't work. But
I said plural, didn't I?
Yeah, but it's sort of like, I think was probably a plumbing issue, more like my urinary system just can't handle, even with stents and stuff. It's just basically has, it's a non-functional urinary system now. So
now I know there's more to this story, but I'd like if you would go back to that moment.
Yes.
Because a big part of this journey is to feel the feelings.
Yes.
And so as you were getting this new news, could you talk to us about your feelings and what you were thinking inside, and how you processed those feelings? What was going on?
Definitely sadness. It's like, oh my gosh, I am so tired of this journey, and it's just exhausting. And anger. I had anger. Like, God, why do I have to go back into this, into the driver's seat again? Because all of a sudden 8 rounds were set up for me, and all this stuff. We have it charted out. It's in my chart now. And then I had a really bad reaction to the first round, and I can talk about that. But so it was definitely, oh my gosh, I got to do this again. And it was.
Was there shock too? Was it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I was like, I just sort of was like, I felt kind of like floating on a river that is torrential underneath me. And I'm kind of like, just kind of floating on it, like being tossed to and fro, like not in control at all. And that's always an uneasy feeling. And, and I was trying to get my bearings and all that. And I figured in my mind that this would be a difficult diagnosis to get through physically, that and in fact may end in my passing. So I was processing mortality issues also at the same time.
So you're confronted with your mortality again. The your emotional state, it felt like you had an unstable foundation, like you're staying on a raft on a rough river without any control over the river. It almost sounds like you're just going down this thing that you have no control over, and it's unstable.
Right.
How did you process that, what you were dealing with? Like, what was the first things you did? How did you process that?
I think for me, I noticed sharing the news was important, and getting people praying, that's important. And it's not that it's just that prayer to me communicates not only with our Heavenly Father, but communicates to me that people are really caring. And, I had one reaction from a good friend of mine who really wept.
Yeah.
And that was helpful because when I saw him weep and I saw some of the other guys, it was in a group session.
Yeah.
I wept.
Yeah,
I couldn't stop crying. And I thought this was a good event for me to do because I hadn't cried about this. My kids are always strong and they're kind of like, okay, Dad, we understand because I told them, and other family members. But this man wept. And
he did.
And that was helpful for me. And I wept, and I felt, it's hard when you have to say to yourself, I really could pass from this. This could be the thing where I pass. Yeah,
this particular man has lost two close family members, a dad and a sister. Recently, a sister in the last year from cancer. Yes. And so when he heard this news, it hit him really hard, and he took time to pray. Yeah, I think this is interesting because I remember we meet on Wednesday nights with a group of guys, and so that's what you're talking about. And and you just had the news and the procedure on Wednesday morning, right? And I remember you and I talked later in the day about it, and then you told the group of guys, and it was. I agree that there was something profound in the emotional processing. So I think that's something to really to understand. It's like you've learned to not hold on to that. You let go of it, and you were ministered to by somebody else who was struggling with their own grief. Right. But you didn't get fixed. I felt like you didn't get fixed. Did you feel like anybody tried to fix you in the process here?
No, I was trying to cry by myself, and I couldn't. So when I saw another person grieving over my news, I was like, oh my gosh, this does have an impact. And why is it not having an impact on me? I'm not sure, but this is having an impact on those closest to me. And that's sad for me to think of that. I mean, whenever I'm watching a movie or something, and a person passes and everyone breaks down, it's sad. I cry at that. It's that outflow of human emotion and love for that person. And so I felt that I saw him grieving, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then I was like, this is sad. This is really sad. So it was in that moment, and it was him sitting in the dirt with me of just expressing raw emotion that was helpful.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you shared that. Yeah. And I watched you the next night as we were in a large group meeting, and you shared what was going on in this large group meeting again. So you're not holding on to this news. You're sharing it with, not trying to broadcast it on Facebook or something like that, but you're sharing with all the people that are close, that you're involved with, that are going to care about what's happening in your journey. You shared it immediately. Right. And the fact that I do want to just explore a bit, because I'm just thinking about the fact that I remember when you talked about your first cancer diagnosis, that you went out and you sat on the sidewalk and you the felt sense of loss and the the way you described it was like you wanted to throw up,
Yeah.
and I think those were your words. And, and this time you needed to actually have the compassion of others to be able to get to the process of being able to cry, to express that loss again of something. I'm thinking about whether or not you've processed your mortality so many times with these recurrences that you're no longer focused on your own mortality for the most part. Do you think that's a true statement?
No, I mean, I do.
Focused.
Yeah. I guess focus. Yeah. I'm not sure. I mean, I can tell you what happened.
Yeah.
I experienced anger towards the Lord. And because if I have my theology tells me that God's in charge, and it's like, well, what's the deal with this again now? Kind of going back to some foundational questions.
Yeah.
But I think I remember I was sitting there in my chair because I had the infusions, and I was just kind of leaning back in my chair, my lazy boy chair, with the windows around me and the woods are all around me. It's a beautiful setting, peaceful. There's no music. It was just quiet. And I remember feeling that anger and thinking, well, how do I process this? And I was like, I don't know why, but I've started to think about, well, does God have a purpose in this? That was a big question for me at that point. Does God have a purpose in this? And I think even though I didn't feel like it, I was able to say, well, he always has, and so I think he does. And that was helpful just to get over a hurdle, right? Just a hurdle in my mind about, man, I'm experiencing all these rough physical effects from this treatment. And it's like, I feel like crap, but, does God have a purpose in this? And
Fascinating, yes.
Yeah, and even though I didn't feel this emotional, oh, of course he has a purpose, I was like, even though I don't feel well, I think, yes, he does. And then I said to myself, well, what if I pass from this? And I remember the sun, shining in the room and stuff. And I looked out of the window and the thought was, this is such a broken place. Just this world, all of us. And I said, my body, it's so broken. And I believe that I have an eternal state. And I thought about closing my eyes and transitioning out of the body and being in this place called paradise where there is no brokenness, no pain, no suffering. And I was like, wow, I think I'm going to be ready for that. I think that I'm going to transition.
You experienced a drop of paradise.
Yeah. Yeah. It was pretty unique because I was looking outside and I was like, this is really a broken place. It has God's glory still, and I can see the evidence of God here, but wow, it's broken.
I like, just the exploration of what you've done and decide the fact that you shared your initial feelings were anger, I think is an important something to just to hear, for me to hear, I think for others to hear, is that it's okay to be angry.
And the anger was, are you kidding me? This is my 20th year, and I've had already 6 recurrences. This is ridiculous.
Those are the words that you heard in your head, yes.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. But you said them.
Yeah.
And you allowed God to hear them.
Yeah.
I mean, anger has a purpose, or the emotion of anger has a purpose for processing. It tells you something about the situation in yourself. Is there some connection there that you now make about the situation in yourself, just as you reflect upon that anger, and you've been processing that for some days. Now I've been in some settings with you. I guess what's weird is I talk about it, is like Wednesday night we were on this online call. Thursday we were doing a meeting together. Friday we connected for a little bit in the evening. So I was like, I was with you like 3 days in a row there.
Yeah.
And you talked about anger all 3 times.
Yeah.
That's something you had to process. That.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So now, because that was such a dominant experience, what do you take from that right now?
I think that the journey to powerlessness is a gift.
More detail. The gift is?
It just doesn't come naturally. And I think that through this processing this anger, it required me to submit and surrender to my higher power. Because if I believe he's in charge, then I'm angry with him.
Can I make a question?
Sure.
Or just throw it? So would you argue that this experience helped you identify whatever was left that wasn't submitted, or a portion that was left that wasn't submitted?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll go so far as to say it's a daily question for me. Will I submit today?
Yeah, I was going to say, this experience did show you how much you've accepted your mortality.
Yes.
It showed you how much you've accepted your willingness to suffer for whatever you've been called into. Mm-hmm. And your anger and how you process this and what you did with that helps you to understand. It's like a marker along the way. Where am I at on this journey of being willing to go wherever God's called me to, even whatever suffering level there is?
Yeah, so I will say this. I had a sense and a level of peace and calm. I won't say it was unprecedented for me, but it was pretty overwhelming. Usually I would be freaking out. And I did not freak out. And I can't say why other than of my experience within this cancer space. I've seen so much now of God do certain things, and I was really yielding over okay, now I've got this. But I was still angry.
I have a thought, and you can say that yes, that engages, or no, I don't think that's right. It's you felt the anger, you recognized your mortality, but what you just described there was that you opened your hands to whatever God had for you, and so there was peace and so forth that came because you got to a point where you saw the pieces that you were still hanging on to, and you opened yourself up to releasing those, even if the journey is painful and the treatments are going to suck. And Friday night, it hit you, right? By Friday night, those treatments had kicked in and you were sick describe that. You went into that. And actually answer that question, because I hit you with it. Does that resonate with you?
Totally.
Yeah.
It was, my palms are open, but I'm mad.
Yeah.
It was like that.
But that mad is, I don't like this.
Right.
But that's honesty.
Yeah, it was honest.
I don't like this, but I'm willing.
Right.
That's what I took off of our connections. And I don't like this at all. I don't want to go here, but your open palms are, but I will go here.
Right.
That sounds like a really healthy place to
and
be
then
in a
I had to
journey.
go to, even if this takes my life, how do I feel about it? And I felt like, okay.
Peace.
I can transition. Yeah.
The speed at which you now are processing your mortality, to me, is that's for somebody who hasn't struggled with their mortality. Like, I'm sitting here with a lot of ignorance, so I'm not coming to, but I've watched people, and it's like, to process your mortality, to be able to accept, the likely outcomes and be willing to embrace whatever is out there in your, mortality and your potential of death coming soon. That's taken a long time, I think, in your journey.
Especially for me, a fearful guy.
Yeah, but this time you got to peace within a few days, which is like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it was kind of like, okay, what are we doing? Business as usual kind of thing. So I don't know. It wasn't so much fear this time. It was more the sadness when I saw other people grieving, and then the anger.
yeah,
And then I got sick physically.
yes,
Yeah. So that Friday night, a day after, I went home and my fever, I just spiked a big time fever and I couldn't get out of bed. And I had my clothes. I felt so chilled. So I just came home from an event and went to bed without taking off anything. And I couldn't get out of bed to take like a jacket off and stuff like that. And my room, I think, was like 90 degrees. So God gave to me a girlfriend who happens to be a nurse for 38 years. And I called her and I said, Michelle, I can't get out of bed. And she talked to me for a while. And she said afterwards she wasn't sure if she should call my brother to come down, but she said I wasn't making any sense. So she drove up 40 minutes and was at my house by 1 and was able to bring the fever down by cooling the room down, cooling my body down, what the washcloths and things like that. Getting stuff off of me so I didn't have so much clothes on and getting fluids in me and all that.
So, something that you've described now in this scenario a few times, and I'm like, as you're talking about this particular incident, is you got to experience God's great care through others.
Yes.
Because you talked about our buddy who prayed over you and wept and his great care. And I know that there were others who expressed their deep care and concern and prayer, and then Michelle coming and showing such deep care that God really showed you how much you were loved in the community.
There are some people when they hear news, and I'm going to call this a gift. It's not that they're eloquent or they do the right things, but their hearts become so heavy with grief, and it pours out of them as a natural thing. And it's helpful for a guy like me that struggles to feel, to be with someone like that at this time, because then I could see the weight of what it all meant, and I could see how somebody else could be so weighed down by my thing and pour out so much love. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter what he said or anything. It was just his eyes, his tears. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The head bowed down, the grief.
Yeah. It's such an important part of this is to grieve.
And not everyone has that gift. I believe that's a gifting.
That's interesting. That's something to explore. I think not everyone is able to interact at that level.
Yeah.
But I'm a person who believes that we can learn to grieve, though, that we can grow in our ability to grieve and process our emotions. And so I do think there's a natural gifting, but the person we're talking about right now has experienced deep loss. And so that deep loss, I think is, Scalzo talks about, he uses this term, enlarging your soul through grief and loss. And so I believe that his soul has been enlarged through grief and loss. I think your soul has been enlarged through grief and loss. And so it's something that God can develop in you. But the people who grieve well are those who have experienced deep grief and had their own souls expanded through grief and loss. And I think there's a capacity question that for those of us who don't process our grief well, that means that as your soul is enlarged, I'll make it like a picture type of thing almost. It's like, think of your soul as a balloon or something like that. Or if you've had grief that's really expanded that balloon, then if you've processed that grief, some of your own grief, and you've released that back out, when someone else has grief, you have capacity to let that be their self again. But for those of us who haven't processed our grief well, when we get grief from somebody else or news or we don't know how, it's like trying to put 3,000 pounds of pressure into a balloon. It's like there's no place for it to go. It's either going to pop it completely or it's nothing. There's no room to put anything else in it. And so it's a beautiful thing that those who grieve well, who have experienced deep grief, have the ability to enter into other people's pain. And so I think that's some of the things to really think about as you're taking on these moments of grief. You're right.
I think
there's a great gift there.
Yeah, and I think too, if you're the patient, to open up your heart to someone who's really grieving, to see the impact that your issue has on them is healthy. In fact, I think God may put grievers in your path so that to help you grieve. And because I tend to be kind of stoic at times and sort of like, okay, I have to get treatment. I have to do this. And this person stopped me to say, hey, hold on. Let's dwell on this one thing. Even though it might feel uncomfortable, let's dwell on this and feel it.
Oh, and
it's super helpful.
I would say our Wednesday night time, we do story work. We shared some of that. And I would say maybe one of the heaviest evenings of story work or similar type of men getting together that I've experienced. And it wasn't just because of yours. We heard some like a really heavy story, and we heard, and so, but maybe the most meaningful or one of the more meaningful times to be able to lean into these heavy moments and to experience others' suffering, loss, and their hard emotional experiences was just such a gift. And so I walked away, yes, with feeling the weight of that, but I also walked away with the gift of that, man, to be able to experience this level of depth with men in my life, I was just totally blown away.
Yeah.
And I think you're experiencing something similar as one of the men who was suffering in this case.
So I'm going to just, because there's another part to this whole story.
So we got to Friday. You've knocked on your butt for the next 2 days.
And my girlfriend's staying in my house, cooking, helping me out of bed. I am really struggling physically. Feel really poorly. No energy, fever. It feels terrible. Sunday, I have cancer support group, and I'm supposed to be leading it, but I stayed home and I Zoomed it. I was able to participate. It's hard to get out of bed, but I did it and shared the news with them, all that. And girlfriend went back. Then Monday, I, had to do things on my own, but she had left me with food, and huge blessing.
Yeah.
Someone comes in, let them do it, man. Huge blessing, Yeah. They're doing it out of love too. And, so I started to go about my day, and I got a call at in fact, I was still in bed. I was like, I don't know if I can get out of bed. It's like 11. And I notice it's my surgeon's head nurse calling me. And so I answer it because it's a special line. It would only call me with tough news or that kind of thing. So I answer it, and she says, Dr. Grasso, he's in surgery right now, but he got pathology back from the biopsy, and it's negative for cancer. And I was like, what? It's negative for cancer. I said, do you realize I'm on my back right now? I had treatment, and she said, I know, but he wants you to know right now it's negative for cancer. I said, I assume I'm going to stop cancer treatment. She said, well, that's for your oncologist to weigh in on.
Wow. Yeah.
Hung up the phone. I'm like, now what is, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Obviously great news, but man, I already put my 2 feet and I firmly planted myself in the metastatic cancer space.
You're back in patient mode. Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I was like, oh my gosh, my life's going to change again. And so then I started to let people know. I think I called you pretty quickly. Yeah.
I talked to you like noon or 1 or
I
something
let
on Monday.
certain people know.
That was wild.
Yeah. And then
I was just blown away.
But I was like, I don't even trust it until I talked to my oncologist. And I expected a call that day, and I didn't get one. So I went to sleep, and I told only a few. I didn't even tell my family yet. My kids, maybe one or two of them, who are more medically oriented.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't spread it around. And then Tuesday morning, I called, and I said, I spoke to her nurse, and I'm like, you have to look at these results and tell me what it all means. I'm supposed to be in there Thursday getting a targeted chemo again.
So you were feeling excitement and confusion at the same time, right? Because it's
totally puzzled.
What's true?
And emotionally, I was like, oh my gosh, I felt like such a mixed bag of emotions, feeling all these things at once. Like I still had the trauma going on.
Yes.
But now I had excitement.
And confusion.
Yes, confusion. So my oncologist called me right away, and she apologized. She said, you're the first person I've ever given cancer treatment to who didn't have a cancer diagnosis.
I love that. That's such a great story.
Yeah. And, I'm like, Lord, I could have been angry about it and all that, but I just basically said, listen, because I've been with this medical team for a long time, and I know God's used them to save my life before. And I just said, look, I am so happy to have a proactive medical team.
Yeah, that's such
and
a
I
great
said,
share.
we're all going to learn something from this, but I'm very active to have a proactive medical team. Just left it at that.
Yeah, they kicked you in the teeth and knocked you down.
Yeah.
With all the best intentions and beliefs.
That's it. I was like, were their intentions bad? No. So what you just said is what it is.
Yeah. So your feelings now, you've gone through a roller coaster week. I mean, this is like, from, hey, I'm on my 7th recurrence. Probably not a good thing. This has such negative connotations. I take a treatment and it totally just knocks you on your butt, and you're knocked out for a few days. And while you haven't quite got out of bed yet, you get news that, hey, never mind. It's not cancer. It's just an inflamed tissue.
And I'm sending around texts to like my siblings, my high school friend group, other relatives, my stepmom. Oh, by the way, just want you to know the senior pastor and the director of care and the other pastor, I sent them a message, special message, elders. Oh, by the way, everyone.
Yeah.
This is the timeline. Wednesday, Thursday, and then pathology comes back and it's not cancer.
On Monday. Yeah. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday you get really sick. All weekend you're down.
Yeah.
Monday the pathology comes back.
Yeah.
And
see, over the weekend I'm trying to gear myself back up for a Thursday for another infusion 1 week later, because that's the rounds. It's eight rounds of it.
Yeah, and the first one was so
it was immunotherapy plus this targeted chemo plus I just had surgery the day prior.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like boom, boom.
Tell me about your emotions now and what you feel about this whole situation.
It's kind of weird. It's there's relief, but I'm still kind of feel unsettled. That's the word, unsettled. Yeah, I'm thankful because I don't have to get any more of the targeted drug. I have to get an iron infusion on Thursday because my iron's so low, but just feeling good about things, but unsettled still. Too. There's like a pit in my stomach still.
Anything new about this scenario that has caught you by surprise?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Caught me by surprise.
I know it's fresh. It's just all happened this last week, and
Yeah.
we just called it we've had an interruption. Your life was interrupted
Yeah.
in such a huge way and
Yeah.
turned upside down again. But that's happened to you before.
Yeah.
And so is there something about this situation? Because I'm thinking about, this has a purpose, and and we've talked about you got to experience. So we'll talk about some of the things I think that you did talk about in this episode, where you get to see where you're at in your surrender of God on every aspect of your life, on your mortality, on your health journey, whether your level of willingness to suffer for whatever your purpose is here.
Yeah.
You got to experience the great care and concern of others around you and the love of others. And I think in many ways, God's love reflected back at you, even as you were experiencing the anger.
You know what I feel like doing right now?
What?
I would just love to go into the woods, even like a hilly place with the sun shining, and lay myself out, arms outstretched, and just look up at the sky with no sound, silence. And because it feels like chaos right now, and just enter a place of just serenity and listen. That's what I feel like doing right now.
Well, that might be the most important part of the share, because you said something earlier, and it was, I feel like experiencing, maybe you're being called to experience paradise, but in the kingdom that's here now. Not in the sense of that, hey, you need to go kill yourself or something weird like that. That is, but you just said, hey, I want to go experience the serenity and presence of God, what paradise is like. That's the call that I feel on me right now. And that this whole experience sounds like it came early in the experience, and you're still feeling that call today. And that might be something really important to explore. Is like there's a level of, a silent solitude, stillness, but peace. And at the end of this here, you've gone through great chaos, and your body desires peace. Your soul desires peace, it sounds like. Is that and so you've identified a deep need inside of yourself.
Yeah, it's like there was a purpose in the storm, but now I just want quietness and to process and to allow it. I don't want to so much process it as I want to let God process it in me.
You identified a deep need in yourself.
Yeah.
And a week later now you're saying, I feel this deep need, and I desire to connect with that, what that need is. And so that's a really interesting thing. Well, I don't want to over push something here. I actually think you sharing this interruption in your life for the last week, and it's a chaotic something that the average person may not even experience this in their lifetime. And so, and you have such an unusual story of, being spared with little odds and being sent home for hospice already 3 times, I think, before. And twice before. And here you are, this experience comes along, and it's a week-long something that just shakes your world, and you even experienced the suffering for a period of time because of this misdiagnosis. And it wasn't misdiagnosis in that there was bad medicine or something like that. It was, hey, we are going to take the most care, and we're going to be as cautious as we can be. We're doing the biopsies, but this is what we believe it is, and the best thing we can do is get after this right away, proactiveness. And then, so because of that, you experienced this physical suffering again. You were reintroduced to it for a period of time. And now you're saying, hey, my heart yearns for God's peace, as we say here today.
Yep.
What an interesting
Yeah.
statement. It's not at all what I was expecting to hear from you.
Oh, yeah.
What you just said. No, I hate that you want to go in the sun and just go experience that peace, but it makes sense when I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You experienced a week of chaos and suffering, and your body's crying out for peace.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's something in that for everybody who's listening. Is like, hey, there are a lot of people who would listen to this who are on a cancer journey and they're experiencing chaos and suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And God wants to give you great peace. And that's an interesting story for this last week. And it's an interruption. It's an interruption in our series, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
What a week to be a part of your life from my perspective, and just to share in the storyline. And I know that so many people feel deeply connected, more connected with you even now because of your willingness to share your life, your willingness to share your experience with us. And I know I'm not the only one. There's many people that are in my sphere that we've talked about, wow, and then the ups and downs. And there's a level of connection that's been, relational connection that's been experienced and grown in us.
Yeah. Well, that's good, because sometimes I'm like, why am I doing a podcast? But I do enjoy our time.
Yeah.
I do enjoy talking. And if someone can glean something from it, it's because anytime we tell our story authentically and transparently, people benefit. I do from other people's stories.
So does anything strike you as, hey, something you do want to share on the backside of this, other than what's already been shared, before we close out this podcast, this week of interruption in your life that you'd like to share with our listeners before we close out?
Just that, again, I was called to a place of surrender and to trust. It's been the mantra for 20 years, surrender and trust.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that your book says cancer and peace, and you're basically saying, hey, surrender and trust, and I want to experience that peace. So there's a consistency here to this story.
That's good.
Well, thank you for sharing this week with us, with me, and with our audience, and with your friends who are close by. Thanks for sharing this week, and it's an amazing story. I'm blown away by it again, and there's so much and there's so much more probably to process than what you can garner in a week when you've had this kind of chaos. But I think there's a gift in your story to all of us. Maybe not a gift in the suffering sense, but there's a gift in your story that I think most of us here will connect with. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll keep going on our series next week with the stages of the cancer journey, and I think we'll have some good stuff there too. But we'll talk to you next time.
Bye now.